Hello everyone, welcome. So in this video, we will be discussing ethics. Ethics is a set of moral principles or values that are used to determine right from wrong. So when we make decisions about certain organisms, animals, plants, in the environment, or how to use something that's not left much, any resources. So that's ethics. Economics is a study of how people use potentially scarce resources to provide goods and services. I'm not gonna discuss economics in this video because this is about ecology. So what helps people make the decisions? So in deciding how to manipulate our environment and meet our needs, we rely on, pros and cons. And our decision making also comes from our culture and our worldview. So, you know, we decide based on our knowledge, based on our beliefs, our values, you know, that's how we decide about things. So, for example, let's say if two people have different worldviews and they can be in the same situation, but they can draw completely different conclusions. For example, let's say two people in Costa Rican ranchers, they own identical land and they can make completely different decisions about the land. So maybe one person can say, I'll receive some payments and conserve the forest. The other might say, I'll clear it out so my cattle can graze there. So it kind of depends on how we're raised, how our worldview is, what our um, beliefs are, how much knowledge do we have. So the application of ethical standards to relationship between people and non-human entities is known as environmental ethics. And our interaction with the environment can give rise to ethical questions that are difficult to resolve. I have some examples here. So, for example, is the present generation obliged to conserve for future generations? So, this deals with the idea of sustainability. Another one, should some community to be exposed to disproportionate share of pollution? This is a central question in environmental justice because poor people are exposed more to these toxic substances in the environment where they work compared to people who have money. So, are there any circumstances where human-driven extinction of a species is justified? So, this is a debate between relative importance of instrumental values and intrinsic values of ecosystem. I'm not going to go in detail about the values. We'll just mainly be focused on um, the ethics and how we make decisions. So, we have three areas where that we use to that we can put the you know put the considerations in. Anthropocentrism is human-centered view. Non-human things are given little to no intrinsic value, which means that they're going to overlook or devalue the notion that non-human things can have any value. And costs and benefits of actions and are evaluated solely based on positive and negative impacts on people. They do not consider the environment. For example, if cutting down a forest for farming or ranching would provide significant economic benefits while doing little harm to aesthetics or human health, they might say, oh, let's do that. It might end up destroying a lot of animals and plants. Biocentrism, in this case, human life and non-human life both matter, and they might oppose clearing a forest if doing so would destroy a great number of plants and animals, even if it produces more food. Ecocentrism, this one judges the actions based on their effects on the ecological systems, including non-living elements. So an ecocentrist value the well-being of entire species, communities, or ecosystem over the welfare of given individual. So those are three areas. So today, society is expanding its ethical concerns to include poor and minority communities. So in recent decades, our society has increasingly recognized inequalities in wealth and privilege, often associated with then gender, ethnicity, or race. And they want to address these imbalances. And that involves applying environmental justice, which is a fair and equitable treatment to all people with respect to environmental policy and practice. So we want to make sure like we're treating all people equally. It's not the effects are not focusing on one type of population more than the other. So this is saying that Latino farm workers they experience health risks from pesticides, fertilizer, and dust exposure. Low-income white Americans in Appalachia are exposed to air pollution from coal mining and coal plants. African Americans in the city of Flint, Michigan were most affected by the lead in drinking water, which we talked about. So when it's not, so that's when you were talking about environmental justice, you recognize that poor people tend to be exposed more to pollution hazards and environmental degradation than richer people. All right, so let's talk a little bit about eco-labeling. So eco-labeling empowers consumers. It's the practice of advertising sustainable practices on the labels of certain products to attract more consumers. So for example, USD organic, you might see the sticker on some of the groceries you buy. Energy Star, more energy efficient appliances and fair trade products. So socially responsible investing is when people decide to invest in companies that are um, supporting sustainability. So, for example, Google offers its employees free bicycles to ride to work. And businesses, they are becoming more aware. They are responding to the sustainability concerns. So, businesses are greening their operations by finding ways to enhance energy efficiency, reduce toxic substances, increase the use of recycled material, and minimizing greenhouse gas emissions. And they usually discover that they can reduce costs and increase the profit. And some examples are a phone company, Credo, donates a portion of proceedings to nonprofit groups that are supporting environmental causes. And Google uses renewable energy to meet much of its energy demand. And they have taken many steps to reduce energy use and offer employee sustainability transportation options like the bike. And Starbucks purchases ethically sourced fair trade and organic coffee that has reduced its water and electricity consumption. And then HP runs a program to reuse and recycle their toner cartridges. Nike collects and recycles sneakers. And then Dell reuses and recycles 98% of its waste. So those are just some examples. So some corporates greening efforts are pursued mostly for public relations and they have little impact, and that's called greenwashing. Those can mislead consumers into thinking the company is acting more sustainably than it actually is. For example, the bottled water industry presents a stark example of greenwashing, and they advertise with words like pure and natural, and they put images of forests and alpine springs that leads us to believe that bottled water is cleaner and healthier for us to drink. In reality, bottled water is often less safe than tap water, and plastic bottles are a major source of waste, and considerable amount of oil is burned to transport these bottles. And then the industry depletes aquifers in local communities. So in the end, it's up to us. If we stop buying the bottled water, they'll stop producing it. It's consumers that encourage, trends in sustainability. Sustainable development is form of economic progress that maintains resources for the future. So, we try to think about it and we want to make sure we can save them for the future. Development describes the use of natural resources for economic advancement, not just survival, and improve improvements to quality of life. And previously, economic development and environmental protection were seen as conflicting ideas. So it includes, construction of homes, schools, hospitals, power plants, factories, and transportation networks. In the past, the development and the protection were not seen, as being the same, on the same page. So, pursuing sustainable development means satisfying a triple bottom line of economic advancement, environmental protection, and social equity. So, programs that pay for ecosystem services are one example of sustainable development approach. They try to satisfy this triple bottom line. So Costa Rica's they have this program called PSA program that aims to enhance its citizens' well-being by conserving the country's natural assets while compensating for affected landlords for the economic losses. So sustainable development is global, and these are some of the goals. This chart is from your textbook. You can read about it. And poverty in all forms everywhere, and hunger. So you can go through these goals, and these are the goals for sustainable development.